Well, it appears that shamans are not going to be the only ones partying this week, as there is another massive wave of updates to all of the classes for the next expansion, The War Within. And as always, if you want to make sure that you're staying up to date with news related to World of Warcraft, then make sure to smash that subscribe button. Your support is greatly appreciated. Death Knights are the first ones here up for discussion. Rider of the Apocalypse, a Feast of Souls can no longer have a chance to refund a rune. Damage from runic power abilities is increased by 30%, while 2 or more horsemen are active, up from 20%. That is a very significant burst increase, especially during your major cooldown that summons all 4 of them on demand. An extra 10% during your burst window for Frost and Unholy is going to be a lot of extra damage. Now for Sand Lane, which is a more survival oriented talent tree, the Blood is Life Accumulator, deals reduced damage beyond 8, so just making sure that they're AoE capping all the abilities. The Blood is Life Accumulator can no longer critically strike, and I've seen a lot of Blood Death Knights in PvE talking about this possibly being really good and really powerful. So likely we're seeing that nerf for this reason. The Corrupted Blood ability of the Blood Beast deals reduced damage beyond 8, still just some AoE capping. Essence of the Blood Queen's haste granted per stack reduced to 1%, down from 1.5. Vampiric Strike now heals for 1 to 2% of your maximum health, down from 3 to 5, so a significant portion of self-healing has been reduced. Vampiric Strike damage has also been reduced by 15%. Infliction of Sorrow now extends the duration of your disease by 2, down from 3, and Infliction of Sorrow now deals 10% of its remaining damage, down from 20. So seemingly nerfs across the board for Sand Lane, while there is, a minor nerf and a buff towards the Rider of the Apocalypse. Now for Frost Death Knights specifically, Icy Death Torrent has had the following changes. Damage now scales with mastery. Damage increased by 100%, and now has a 50% chance to trigger on auto attack critical strikes while dual wielding, and 100% while wielding a two-handed weapon. So they seemingly do want dual-wielding Frost Death Knights to at least be something of relevancy here, and I've seen that brought up quite a lot in the comment section. Now deals reduced damage, though, beyond 8 targets. Pillar of Frost strength is being boosted up to 30% from 25. Enduring strength has been boosted to 20 from 15. Long Winter now extends Pillar of Frost by 2 seconds of a maximum of 6. Shattering Blade now increases Frost Strike damage by 125 up from 100. And Shattered Frost now causes Frost Strike to deal 65% of its damage to nearby enemies, up from 50. Some really big buffs across the board for Frost Death Knight. Hyperixia's chance to trigger has been increased to 35 and deals 45% additional damage, up from 30. Rage of the Frozen Champion's runic power generated from Howling Blast reduced to 6, down from 8. And Smothering Offense now increases auto attack damage by 10%, up from 6. So bursts, sustain, a little bit of resource generation nerfs, but I think the burst and the sustain is going to more than outweigh that. This seems to be a big win for Frost Death Knights. Now, Unholy Death Knight, this does not look good for you. Clawing Shadow damage reduced by 15%, Raise Ghoul damage reduced by 10%, Scourge Strike damage reduced by 15%, Death Coil damage reduced by 15%, Magus of the Dead damage reduced by 15%, Apocalypse Ghoul damage reduced by 15%, Epidemic damage reduced by 15%, and Festering Wound damage reduced by 15%. These are the dangers of being an outlier on the beta when all of the eyes and all of the pens to write in these changes are there, which is what I was talking about, the trend, Frost Stonks are probably going to go up as we move on, but Unholy, you got hit pretty hard with this one, I will say. Now for Druid, hero talents, Boundless Moonlight damage increased by 25%, Minor Moon damage increased by 110%, Lunar Calling increases Starfire damage by 65, up from 40. Lunar Insight increases Moonfire damage by 20, up from 10. And Atmospheric Exposure increases damage taken by 6, up from 4. So really big buffs to Elune's Chosen at this point. Definitely a lot more of a strong contender, at least for Boomkin. Keeper of the Grove, Bounteous Bloom causes your Trents to generate 7 astral power every 2, up from 6. A little bit of a buff as well to the Keeper of the Grove, but I would say not nearly as substantial as Elune's Chosen. Definitely have to check that out. I really want to get my hands on this beta build because there's so much has gone into this now, especially with the Shaman rework. Wild Stalker for Feral and Resto, Thriving Growth causes Bloodseeker Vines to grow 15% less frequently. Vigorous Creepers increases damage done to targets afflicted by Bloodseeker Vines by 5, down from 6. Burst bursting growth damage reduced by 15. Please note that the entirety of this change will be applied with next week's beta, but will be present in this week's build. So a couple of moderate nerfs here to the Wildstalker build, which I'm honestly not surprised to see. I think it's been kind of a top performer at the moment. Now for Boomkin specifically, Astral Smolder has a 40% chance to trigger down from 45 and deals 50% of Wrath or Starfire's damage over time from 40. So a lower chance to proc, but a higher overall amount of damage. Stellar Flare is getting a 10% damage buff. Wild Surge increases Wrath and Starfire critical strike down up from 10, or it's down from 12 to 10. Bit of a nerf there. Stellar Amplification damage bonus increased to 20, up from 12 though. And Umbral Intensity increases the damage bonus to Wrath and Starfire by 25 and 50. It was 20 and 40. Umbral's Embrace damage bonus reduced to 75 though, from 100. And Umbral's Inspiration duration increased to 6, up from 5. And damage bonus increased to 30, up from 20. Touch of the Cosmos chance to trigger from Wrath increased to 12. And chance to trigger from Starfire increased to 15 from 10. Astral Communion now grants 20 Astral Power on entering Eclipse, up from 12. And Elune's Guidance reduces the Astral Power cost of Star Surge by 10, up from 8. And Starfall by 12 from up to 10. Power of Goldrinn damage has, however, been nerfed by 10%. Orbit Breaker calls down a full moon every 25 shooting stars, down from 30. Sundered Firmament will call down a Fury of Elune at 25% power, up from 20. And Convoke the Spirits is more likely to cast Star Surge. Convoke the Spirits will now prefer to cast Star Surge or Full Moon on your current target if valid. Now, I believe they removed Full Moon from Convoke in PvP, but with this casting Star Surge, it might be a possible pickup now. All damage reduced by 5%. So it's very tough to say what is actually going to happen with Boomkin after this. They did a lot of changes focused around your hard casted spells, your generators. Generally, those are less powerful in PvE, so I'm not surprised. And some rearrangements of your astral power costs. Curious to see how this plays out with the buffs that they also made to Fury, the hero talents. For Feral Druid, Convoke the Spirits will now prefer to cast Ferocious Bite or Feral Frenzy on your target if valid. So Convoke might be making a comeback. Convoke was really good when it came out in Shadowlands, and they're putting some very powerful spells back into it. Implosive Trap for Hunters has been reduced to a 60 from a 90-second cooldown. Steady Shot's cast time is getting reduced by 0.10 seconds to 1.65 from 1.75. Arcane Shot damage is being buffed for Marksman. Penetrating Shot's critical strike damage bonus increased to 40% of your crit chance, up from 20. Aim Shot damage is getting 10% buff. Rapid Fire is getting a 10% buff. Trick Shot's effectiveness, however, has been reduced to 65, down from 70. So a little bit of an AoE nerf for likely, these are going to be AoE buffs as well when you're trick shotting them anyway. So it's a little bit evened out in AoE, but I think in single target your damage is going to be a bit higher as a result, and crit might be a little more desirable. For survival, Mongoose Fury reverted to previous functionality. Flanking Strike range reduced to 15, and Flanking Strike is no longer a passive override for Kill Command. I think it was good. This is the thing where it's good for them to experiment, try something, but then when it doesn't work, just accept that it doesn't work and then move forward from there, remove it, revert it, go somewhere else. I think that the most dangerous changes are the ones where something doesn't get changed out of reluctance, or something gets changed and it doesn't work out and then never gets dealt with again in the future. So I like this. Tried it, didn't work, and now going back on it. This is really important as far as making sure that the changes in the future are going to be good. Flanking Strike, once again, gains twice the damage bonus from Tip of the Spear. Bloody Claws has been updated. Now also causes Kill Command to extend the duration of Mongoose Fury by 1.5. That's really good. Flanking Strike cost has also been now cost 15 focus, as opposed to replacing the Kill Command. For mages, Spell Slinger for Frost and Arcane. This is a big one for Arcane. What's going on here? Spell Frost Teachings damage bonus reduced to 10 from 20. Spell Frost Teachings chance to trigger reduced. Arcane Splinter damage reduced by 3%. Frost Splinter damage increased by 3%. So a buff towards Frost, but I'm not sure how much impact Spell Frost Teachings is going to have overall. Arcane is getting more of a touch-up. Evocation is getting a facelift. Increases your mana regeneration by 1,500. You're going to grant clear casting, and while you're evocating, your intellect gets increased by 2% every 0.5 seconds or 20 seconds. So evocation is going to be like this big power-up moment. Not only is it going to be managing your mana, but also powering you up. Because at least in the builds that I've been running, even in dungeons and PvP, it all avoided evocation. But this might turn it into like a secondary arcane surge, or if you layer them together, it could be really crazy burst. Mana Adept is now learned automatically when speccing into Arcane. Arcane Missiles damage is increased by 20%. I'm surprised to see this. Arcane Barrage damage, though, has been reduced by 10%. Arcane Orb has been reduced by 15%. So they're nerfing the AoE, buffing the single target. Aether Attunement damage bonus increased to 150% on primary target and 100% to nearby enemies. It was 150 respectively, so a buff to missiles. Arcane Blast has also seen a nerf by 10%. Position of the talents have been moved around. And the following talents have been removed: Chrono Shift, Crackling Energy, Siphon Stormed, and Improved Arcane Missiles. Now, Chrono Shift, I don't believe is the snare one, right? If this is the snare one from Arcane Barrage, this could be a really big nerf, seeing that removed. For fire, Pyroblast is getting a 5% damage buff. Flurry is getting a 10%, Frostbolt's getting a 10%, Iceland's getting a 10%. So buffs for Frost, some rearrangement of damage output for Arcane. For Brewmaster, Elixir of Determination reduced to 50% of recently purified damage. Retribution Aura is being removed. As part of our process of examining raid buffs, we come to the decision to remove Retribution Order in order to reduce restrictions on group compositions. We believe that the utility options additional paladins are able to bring is sufficiently valuable without becoming oppressive. Retribution Aura was the one where like somebody died, you gained wings, wasn't it? Am I mistaken on this? Aura is a Swift Vengeance talent node replaced with Crusader Aura. Retribution Expurgation now lasts 9 seconds up from 6. Templar Strikes now only has 1 charge down from 2. Templar Strike damage has been increased by 50%. Templar Slash damage has been increased by 125%. I think this is the new combo version of your ability. It seems like it's getting a lot of attention here. An issue of Art of War, Blade of Justice reset, triggering more than it should have been, has been fixed. For Priest, for the hero talents for Voidweaver, and Tropic Rift now properly scales this damage up when it grows from casting Penance or Devouring Plague, and Entropic Rift damage has been reduced by 25%. The Voidweaver just continues to get nerfed, continues to get plowed into the ground. Now for Shaman, I'll have the video linked at the end, but these updates here for the Shaman changes are the same changes that I covered in my video. So that video will be linked at the end because it's a massive rework towards all 3 specializations. Sorry, not enhancement so much. But now we've got Warlock, hero talents for Hellcaller. Zalan's Cruelty has been redesigned. Shadow damage dealt by your spells and abilities increased by 2%, and your shadow spells gain 10% more critical strike chance from all sources. Zalan's Ferocity has been redesigned. Fire damage dealt by your spells and abilities increased by 2%. Your fire spells gain 10% more critical strike chance from all sources. So we see a heavy focus on secondary stats, on trying to make typical secondary stats that are not valuable to classes a little bit more valuable. And we see this here again with the crit modifier changes. They've updated some icons. We've redesigned Zalan's Cruelty and Ferocity for clarity purposes, as it was unclear that Shadow Flame effects should benefit from both damage increases, both critical strike chance increases. Demonology, your Felguard now charges its target when using Soul Strike. Extra mobility for your pets, always great. The Houndmaster's Gambit has been moved. They moved a whole bunch of your talents around. We've adjusted the pathing of several talents in the bottom section of the Demonology tree to resolve issues where a talent could be chosen and have no functionality if another talent wasn't taken. In addition, your Felguard now charges. This is restored functionality that Soul Strike lost after becoming a pet ability rather than a player ability. For Warrior Slayer, Fierce Follow Through now grants 10% additional damage to your next Mortal Strike, and Bloodthirst, it was 15%. Please note the entirety of this change will be applied later, so a little bit of a nerf to Slayer. For Arms Warrior, Blade Master's Torment now grants 8 seconds of sweeping strikes instead of the full duration. However, this 8 seconds will be added to any existing sweeping strikes and vice versa, similar to the other Warrior Torment talents. I think this is a big nerf. I was running the one now where you proc Recklessness instead. I think in PvE, obviously, getting sweeping strikes is great, but in PvP, it's a very minor increase. It's a way bigger loss to lose a Blade Storm on this one for Warrior. For Fury, big buffs here. Rampage damage increased by 15%. Raging Blow damage increased by 10%. Improved Raging Blow's chance for Raging Blow to reset on its cooldown increased to 25 up from 20. Bloodthirst damage, though, has been reduced by 10. Odin's Fury damage has been reduced by 15%. Crushing Force now gives 2 to 4% Bloodthirst critical strike chance, down from 5 to 10. Fixation that caused Crushing Force to increase Bloodthirst damage by 10 to 20% instead of the listed 5 to 10. I always get concerned when I see changes like this. Like, I'm glad they're catching this, but like, how many of these are actually in the game where it's like that the tooltip is not doing what it says, because it's always very concerning to see. Reckless Abandon's Bloodbath damage reduced by 26% and Crushing Blow damage reduced by 3. So this is a trade-off. You know, they're targeting some specific talents for your baseline abilities, which likely is them trying to open up more builds in terms of those options, but those previous existing talents are feeling some pretty substantial nerfs. Now for PvP specifically, we see a lot of changes towards Shaman. Electrocute, I think, is making a comeback. I didn't realize that they had removed this, but when you successfully purge a beneficial spell, the enemy will suffer nature damage. Now this really depends on how they tune it, because stamina and health is going up by a lot, so this actually has to do a significant amount of damage. Now Shamanism also is now available for Elemental. This is you being able to Bloodlust on a 60-second cooldown, an ally and yourself. So giving 20% haste, giving power infusion on a 1 minute cooldown. You're now going to be able to get that as elemental, which is kind of cool, especially with a lot of the PvP talents previously now becoming either on the class kit or being removed. Curious to see how if this sees any play. For enhancement, new PvP talent, you're also getting electrocute. For restoration, Shaman, I was surprised to see this, but they're buffing lightning bolt damage for resto, but I think they removed Stormkeeper. So I don't really understand the point of buffing lightning bolt damage when they remove Stormkeeper from the talents, unless they changed that or updated that, because you're just going to flame shock and lava burst. I don't see any point in casting lightning bolt, because if you get kicked on it, you can't heal. Whereas if you cast lava burst, you can heal if you get kicked. I was honestly expecting to see that on the LE side. I'm wondering if this was supposed to be on the LE part of the update, because it doesn't make sense to me that this is even here for resto. Living Tide now reduces the cooldown of Healing Tide Totem by 45. Previously it was 60. Remember, a lot of the cooldowns are getting reduction anyways now. Like Ascendance is like a 2 minute cooldown. Big changes there. So this is probably a readjustment in terms of just making sure that Resto Shaman isn't absolutely ridiculously crazy when it comes to PvP. And it seems like we are obviously not at the stage where they're going to be doing a huge amount of PvP tuning. I think right now it seems to be mostly focused around Mythic Plus and likely the raid testing that's been going on. I think when they start doing more play with the blue PvP events, that's when we're going to start seeing more PvP specific updates. These seem to be very tailored to at least the classes that they're directly reworking at the time, if there's something that can be addressed. So I'm really interested to see what comes through moving forward for that. But another class update, wanted to keep you guys in the loop with this one. Thank you very much for watching the video, and I will see you in the next one.